Okay, anyway, really big welcome to everybody. If you haven't met me before, my name is Satyajyoti, which I've written up here, Satyajyoti. And yeah, it's just really great to see you all here, and also welcome to anybody who might be watching at home as well. I want to give a particular welcome actually to Vimla Dasa. Where's Vimla Dasa? Yay! You stand up, show off. Lovely to see you, and lovely to see your lovely white kesa. Okay, so we're in a series which is looking at the goal of enlightenment, a series of talks. We've gone through the wheel of life, we've gone through the spiral, the path towards the goal, and now we're talking about, well, what is this all about? What is the goal that we're heading towards? So what is the awakened mind and heart? What is the mind of a Buddha like? Can we get a sense of where we might be heading towards? Because I think, the Buddha himself did not find his experience very easy to communicate, because it's by its very nature, it's a very different consciousness to our normal consciousness. It's beyond words and concept. It's wonderfully mysterious. So it's quite hard to communicate. And that's what we're looking at, is how do we communicate some of the aspects of enlightenment? And when the historical Buddha was still alive, it seems that he had a very strong effect on lots of people. He'd walk around and he'd meet people, and he knew what was the right thing to say. And they also picked up something from him. So he'd often just meet people and they'd go, wow, this is amazing. I'd really like to practice the Dharma. He didn't really say very much, but people just really responded to him. But after he died, gradually Buddhism actually became a little bit dry. It became a bit lacking in something magical, that thing that the Buddha brought, the sense of it's mysterious that he embodied. In fact, it became a little bit kind of removed from the goal of Buddhism itself. So the use of the imagination, symbols, myths, archetypal images became an even more important part of Buddhist practice and Buddhist thought. And one way that experience of enlightenment has been seen imaginatively, symbolically, this experience of being awake, of being free from seeing through the lens of our deluded minds, it's been expressed as through what's known as the Mandala of the 5 Buddhas. Yay! So this is the Mandala of the 5 Buddhas. If you're in the room, you've got a handout, and you've also got a picture of the Mandala of the 5 Buddhas on your handout. And Bodhi Naga introduced this really well, this Mandala of the 5 Buddhas, last week. So if you missed that, it might be worth going and having a look at YouTube. We can see all the past talks and having a watch of that talk. But if you imagine that all these figures are made of light. So actually on this picture, they're quite difficult to see. And I think that's quite good in a way, because they're a sense that they're mysterious, made of light. They're not, they're not made of flesh and blood like we are. In the middle is a white figure, very mysterious. Very actually, he's called this white figure made of white light, really expressing enlightenment, almost fading into the sky there. And it's as if that white light passed through a prism or a raindrop, and from it there came a rainbow of lots of different colours, which express different aspects of enlightenment, which appeal to different people. So as I'm talking, as this series goes on, you might think, oh, which of these figures or symbols that we talk about, which appeals to me, which speaks to me? So they have different qualities. So traditionally, one way of looking at these qualities is on 2 different axes that go through the mandala. We have the blue Buddha, Akshobhya, who's down at the bottom, and he expresses the wisdom, clarity end of the spectrum. And the red Buddha at the top of that axis, he expresses the more compassionate, love, heart end of the spectrum. And both of these are experiencing on that axis, it's about an inner experience. Whereas on the other axis, we have the yellow or golden Buddha, which particularly symbolizes abundance and generosity. And at the other end, a green Buddha, he's actually green, you can't see that, he's green Buddha, who's connected with action and success. So ideally today, Paranita would have been stood here talking about the blue Buddha. We'd have gone in the traditional way. However, sadly, Paranita has COVID, and so she can't give the talk today, though I really hope she will in a few weeks. But instead, I'm going to start with the green Buddha, which is completely not where you're meant to start. So we're going to start with the green Buddha. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the green Buddha, his name is Amoghasiddhi, which is here on the flip chart if you can see it. And you've got a picture of the green Buddha there as well. And his name means unobstructable success. His wisdom is all-accomplishing, so he's about action and activity. So one way to meet Amoghasiddhi is to imagine yourself way up in the north. Maybe it's the wilderness of Scotland, maybe it's northern Scandinavia, and it's deep in a pine forest. You're deep in a pine forest. It's winter, deep midwinter, and it's midnight. The sky is dark, just the stars, the dark blue of the sky. And because it's clear, you can see an amazing number of stars as well. Around you are the evergreen pine trees of this northern forest. So in the forest, you're standing, you can hear rustling and cries. You can hear something's going on, in the darkness. And it's quite easy to become afraid, actually, because you don't know what those noises are. But then you see something coming in the sky, coming towards you at great speed. It's a great chariot in the sky, pulled through the sky by two strange flying creatures. And in the chariot is a great being of deep green light. He's mysterious and beautiful, and his light's transforming the midnight sky so that everything is now radiant and clear. His right hand is up in a powerful mudra, this mudra, and it seems to banish the darkness, the fears of the night. And his other hand is holding a double vajra, two thunderbolts, diamond thunderbolts crossed and fused together. And the night is full of noise because the creatures that are pulling, these strange creatures that are pulling the chariot through the sky, they're half eagle, they're half human being, and they're holding cymbals, big cymbals, and they're crashing them. They're crashing bang, bang, as they fly through the sky. So the chariot fills up the sky, and then it passes away, over you and away. And it leaves behind the beautiful northern lights, those green northern lights just dancing in the sky, a deep green in the midnight sky. So that's Amoghasiddhi, coming to see you and then heading off somewhere. So Amoghasiddhi, the Buddha of unobstructed success. So what I thought we'd do is start by looking at some aspects of that image. So it's an image of enlightenment, or a picture, or even a story of enlightenment, which is full of movement. Very different from the Buddha sitting under the tree, but still the same aspect of the same experience. But this is about movement, power, activity. And as I show you these images, just look at them and think, well, what does this mean to me? Does this have an emotional effect on me? It's fine if it doesn't, but it's just being open to whatever effect it might have on you. So the first one, that is Amoghasiddhi. The first one is the midnight sky. So imagine yourself when you've been lucky enough to be somewhere where there isn't much, light from humans, not many lamps and things, and you're somewhere where you can really see the sky, and how you feel when you look up into that sky. And some of the, we'll all feel differently, but some of the ways that I feel the mystery of the night sky. It's amazing that there are just all this infinite number of galaxies, stars, planets up there, so far away. It's just extraordinary. And I can feel very small, actually, in this, but in a really good way. It's kind of in a way that's like full of awe for the magnificence of the universe. And actually, without whoever's looking at this sky, without the magic of our consciousness, it's like this infinite world would not be witnessed. So we're bringing something to it as well, something to this magic. And I think also sometimes the night can, it can also be darkness. It can be our deepest fears. Some of our most primal fears can come into our awareness in the middle of the night as well. That's often when I wake up in the night and I get really anxious about things. Then in the morning I go, what was that about? Do you know what I mean? It's like those things can really come into my mind in the night. So this is the midnight sky that Amoghasiddhi comes from. So this is the next image, the double Vajra, again on your handout. So those of you who've recently come from an intermediate course, you may well remember that in one of the weeks on the intermediate course, we looked at the Vajra, the single Vajra, one of these. And we talked about it as a symbol. Some of you might have held it, actually. We often have Vajras that we pass around and you get a sense to hold and feel the weight of the Vajra. And the single Vajra is a symbol of awesome power and force. And it can cut through anything whilst remaining unaffected. So nothing mundane can withstand its impact. So very strong, the single Vajra, but the double Vajra has all those qualities and much more, because it's a symbol of total psychic integration, of perfect harmony, of balance and equilibrium. And it's been described as the primordial pattern of human consciousness. So I think to Indian meditators, they saw this double Vajra as this pattern of human consciousness. They also, in Indian early cosmology, they saw it as the support on which the universe rests. So Indian cosmology has a vision which seems to be as expansive as modern science, as I understand it, that of universes evolve and pass away over eons, over unimaginably long periods of time. So before this universe, there have been other universes. This one came into being, it will pass away. And at the moment, there are many other universes also existing at the moment. So I don't really know whether this link between modern physics and ancient Buddhist thought works if you really explore it. But it's interesting, isn't it, that those early meditators had some very similar ideas as modern physicists do. Yes, so the double Vajra, it supports the universe and it forms the deepest pattern of our individual consciousness. I don't kind of really know what that means at all, but it kind of speaks to me of something really interesting, some kind of pattern that's running through our consciousness, through the universe. Something very powerful, something magical in the double Vajra. This double Vajra that Amoghasiddhi carries. So this next image is the pine forest. So Amoghasiddhi himself is green, made of green light. And this is, the pine forests of the north. And green is really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure we've all had experience of how refreshing it can be to look at green. In fact, just this morning I was looking out of my window. I see quite a lot of bricks, but there's one bit of the garden where I see green. And in the rain, it's just so beautiful, so refreshing and peaceful, and so nourishing, the green. You know, we can just go out into the woods, can't we, and just drink in that wonderful feeling of being in nature. So this green image of a pine forest. But also green is a very powerful, I think there's a silent power in plants and trees. So, plants can go through just little cracks in the concrete. And as they grow, and in old buildings that have been, aren't looked after, slowly plants can grow, ivy can grow, buddleia can grow, all sorts of things can grow, and they can destroy the concrete. They can break up the roads, they can break up buildings and roofs. It's amazing what these little, very delicate plants can actually do. So I think in green, there is peacefulness, and there's also power, a silent power. But you might have different connections with green, so it's worth exploring what that means to you. So these are all images associated with Amoghasiddhi, and now we're going to look at, I think, the final one we're going to look at today, the mudra. Sadly, that mudra is quite small. It's a very powerful image, the mudra. I might go back to Amoghasiddhi himself. I think he does it better. There he is. So it says, this is the Abhaya mudra, which means fearlessness. So this is a mudra of fearlessness. So if you don't feel self-conscious, in fact, if you feel brave, you could try it. You could try, put your hand like this and seeing how that feels to you. So all these Buddhas have particular mudras, which are kind of ways that their hands are that represent different things. So you can bring that down if you want. But to me, I find that really powerful, actually. It's a real kind of no to fear, or something like that, just a very strong movement. So Amoghasiddhi, so he's this aspect of enlightenment that's active, that is successful. And I have clarity about what success is here. It's not worldly success. It's not like getting, loads of A-levels or something like that, and a really good job. It is the success of us, moving towards enlightenment, the success of transformation, of freedom of mind and heart. It's that success of actually transforming ourselves into the potential that we all have. And there are two particular quite uncomfortable emotions that Amoghasiddhi is associated with helping us overcome: envy and fear. So today I'm not going to talk about envy, even though I think one day soon I'd really like to. It's a really interesting subject, I think. Today we're concentrating on fear, Amoghasiddhi, and how he can help us overcome fear. Because fear can actually stop us being successful. It can stop us accomplishing what we want to do. In many ways, it can get in the way. We think we want to do something, but we're too scared to do it. And I'm going to, in a minute, read from a very lovely text. It's a ritual that's been written to a figure called Green Tara. And probably quite a few of you came across Green Tara in the intermediate course. I hope you remember her, if you did. And she's a green Buddha. She's got lots of different aspects to her Green Tara, but she's a green Buddha from the same family as Amoghasiddhi. These Buddhas all have families with loads of different figures in. It's really a complicated and wonderful kind of, what would you call it? I don't know, pantheon. So I don't know if that is the right word, but it's kind of like, it's amazing. And if you are interested in all these figures, this book is great, which is Vasantra's Meeting the Buddhas. And you can get it in the library if you're lucky, though there probably aren't many copies in there. Or at the moment, there are 2 books by him that in the bookshop that go through all the figures. And quite soon it's going to be republished just in one book as well. If you do have a copy of this at home, I think you can sell it for about £70 or £80 on eBay at the moment, or Amazon. So, yeah, I know. But they are republishing it. Okay. So away from eBay and Amazon, let's bring our mind to this very beautiful text from Green Tara. So it goes: before you, Green Tara, I confess to all the commonplace worries and anxieties that fill my day, so that I rarely take an easy breath. The fear that stops me trying, the fear that creates a facade, the fear of being with others, the fear of being alone, the fear that makes me harsh, tight, and unkind, the fear of not getting what I want, that makes me grabbing and self-concerned. Before you, I confess the deep fears: fear of madness, fear of death, fear of life, fear of anything beyond the tortoise shell of my own ego. Before you, I confess most of all the fears that hold me back from giving myself to the Dharma: fear of commitment to the path, fear of change, fear of renunciation, fear of generosity, fear of courage, fear of going deeper, fear of freedom, fear of wisdom, fear of devoting myself to all beings. These fears did not arise by themselves. They stem from a million choices and acts: choosing unawareness, choosing lack of courage, choosing to bury my head in samsara. So I think that's really beautiful. I particularly love or relate to the very beginning, where it's like the commonplace worries and anxieties that fill my day, so that I rarely take an easy breath. And that's just such a sad way to live, isn't it? Where it's like, we're not even breathing properly because we've got this like fear of all these everyday things. An important point is that, of course, there are some forms of fear that are very helpful to our survival. So, for instance, if a bus is heading towards us, the fear that triggers that adrenaline so we can jump out of the way quickly, that's a really important and helpful kind of fear. We're not going to try and get rid of that. That's really helpful. And that's the fear we kind of evolved on the savannah, isn't it? To keep us out of the way of tigers and snakes. But for many of us today, I think, especially living like in the privileged West, our fears today aren't of that sort. So my own experience is that much of the fear that I experience on a day-to-day basis is more anxiety, that kind of anxiety about the everyday things. And actually often they don't happen. Like 100% of the time they don't happen how like I imagine them in my anxious ponderings and ruminations. But so there's something very interesting about this anxiety and why we do that. And I'm not blaming myself or anyone for this, because I think it's in our culture and it's very understandable. But I don't think the anxiety is helpful, because it cuts me off from people. So some fear is really helpful, but this kind of anxiety that probably all of us have experienced here what I feel is it really just cuts me off, because I'm so concerned about myself that I can't really be with the people that I'm with. An example would just be last week when my mum has had a hip replacement. It's gone really well. I'm here. My sister's in Manchester looking after my mum, and I didn't know how things were going. And I just told myself so many stories about these difficulties they were having with each other and how my mum was and all this kind of stuff. And actually, they were completely fine. They were completely fine. And I'd given myself an evening of anxiety, and I just didn't need to, So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about here. So, So what do we do when we feel fear and anxiety that stops us from acting how we'd like to? So I think the first thing is to learn not to be afraid of fear. So there's an interesting sutta, which is an ancient writing from the time of the Buddha. And in this, the Buddha, before he was enlightened, actually, so it's when he was training to be enlightened, and he tells a story in the Sutta of Fear and Dread. Great title, the Sutta of Fear and Dread. And he talks about how he was walking in the forest, and he was in the jungle. Okay, so he was in a jungle where actually there were some pretty good reasons to be afraid, I think. There probably were really some tigers and snakes and maybe bandits. But anyway, he was realizing that as he was walking there in the jungle on his own, he was feeling a lot of fear. And he wondered, what should I do with this? So what he decided to do was, if when he was walking he experienced fear, well, he wouldn't stop walking. He'd stay with the fear. If when he was lying down, he started to feel fear, well, he wouldn't stop lying down. He'd stay there. And if he was sitting up, exactly the same. He'd stay with it. So what he's saying in that sutta is that by staying with the fear, we can actually learn not to be so afraid of it. Because sometimes for me, it's the fear of being afraid that is the thing that's really difficult. You see what I mean? That's the thing. And there's a wonderful self-help book, which some of you might have read, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I think there's just something really strong in that. It's like, the title says it all. I don't think you even need to read the book, probably. It's basically sometimes we feel scared and we think that's a reason not to do things. And actually, sometimes if we carry on and do those things, it's amazing what happens. So, so something about what the Buddha was doing, he didn't know it, but he was feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And that's something that we can do. And for me, I think something that I feel like I hopefully have overcome mostly, a bit anyway, quite a lot, is I'm quite shy, actually. I'm quite shy. And when I was young, I was really shy. Found it really hard to talk to people, if I didn't know them. Really hard to do that kind of small talk thing, to go up to strangers and say hello. And when I first came to the centre, so I'd sort of sit really quietly and kind of hope that other people would talk to me. And as time went on, I realised actually that wasn't very helpful to other people, because it leaves other people in this awful situation. They're trying to bring me out of myself. Do you know what I mean? And I really wanted to kind of meet people and not be so paralysed by this shyness. And I watched a few people, Amoghasiddhi, who some of you might know, Maitri Vasan, who probably all of you do know, or most of you know. And I watched how they were with people. And I realised that they would just go up to people and they just kind of go, hello, how are you? Something, not how are you, because that's quite a difficult question to answer sometimes, isn't it? But, just say something. And they wouldn't be caught up in seeming a bit stupid, because a lot of my shyness would come from, if I say something, it would just seem really stupid and a bit inane, And actually, over the time, I kind of being involved in courses here is really good, because lots of people turn up and I don't know them. And I've kind of learned over the years to go up to people and go, hello, where have you travelled from today? Or where do you live? Or something like that. Have you meditated before? And the questions in themselves don't actually matter. And I feel what I'm getting over is that fear of somebody judging me or something like that, because I'm asking them a bit of a silly question. And it's had a really strong effect on me, actually. I mean, it gives, you can imagine the difference between being a bit paralysed by shyness to actually being able to go up to people you don't know and have a conversation with them. And of course, most people are really lovely back. I don't think anyone's ever gone, what a stupid question you just asked. If they've thought that, they haven't told me it anyway. So that's something about, I think we can learn to overcome these fears. We can practice to do it. So that's one thing, is feel the fear, do it anyway, learn how to come over it, get over it. The second thing is something about questioning the story. So, you know, when I was telling you about I was anxious about my mum and my sister, well, actually, I had this feeling of anxiety and I didn't really know what I was anxious about. You know what I mean? It's like I knew it was connected with them, but I was just like feeling all this anxiety, and I had to kind of sit down and ask myself, well, what is it that I'm afraid of? And actually, there wasn't really anything real there. If you see what I mean? I couldn't think of what I thought it was that was so awful that would have happened, if that makes sense. And sometimes I can't do that when I feel like I'm in the grip of fearlessness, but writing it down can help me, actually. Sometimes I can write it down or talk to somebody else about it. I don't seem to be able to think it through on my own very well, if you see what I mean, but writing it down really helps. And then, I mean, I'm sure there are loads of other ways that probably you could talk about and share with each other about overcoming anxiety or working with anxiety, actually. Maybe, yeah, working with it. But the third thing I think is really lovely is developing the power of giving fearlessness. So giving, you've probably come across Dharma, the word Dharma, really important in Buddhism. And one of the things that the Buddha said we can give is we can give fearlessness. So that means that if we're in a situation where there is anxiety and fear, we can give reassurance. We can embody, a relaxedness. That's the word, yeah. We can, so ways that we can do that, for instance, is not passing on anxiety. So, maybe you've heard something dreadful in the news. Well, you don't need to pass it on unless you think there's a good reason why. This is not pretending that things are okay when they're not, okay? This is not some kind of avoiding the truth, but it's more like, let's not encourage anxiety in each other. And also, I think there's something about not being afraid to be positive in a situation and to kind of keep calm and happy. Actually, nothing wrong with being happy, even in a difficult situation. And I was thinking that, like, if you're in a sinking ship, do you want the crew to be going, oh my God, we're going to drown, everybody, panic, kind of thing? Or do you want them to be kind of going, okay, please, keep calm, go to the lifeboats, make your way, everything will be okay. Do you see what I mean? It's like, and we're kind of often in that situation, aren't we, where we could either be the people kind of going, yeah, it's going to be all right, or we could be the people that are just kind of building the anxiety up. So I love this idea of the power of giving fearlessness. Okay. So I think what we're going to have now is a little story from the time of the Buddha, a story of Angulimala. So, which demonstrates the Buddha's fearlessness. So Angulimala was a serial killer, and his name means garland of fingers. So he'd taken a vow for black magic reasons to kill 100 people, and from each one he'd cut off a finger, and he put it in a very gruesome necklace around his neck. That I can imagine just got more and more gross, actually, as time went on, just like his fingers around his neck. And he'd got to number 99. So he was nearly at 100 and he could go off and do his wicked black magic. But nobody was going out of their houses in the area where he was. Quite rightly, they were all just staying inside. But the Buddha came to that area. And the local people said to the Buddha, this guy is ferocious, do not go into his territory. Don't go there. He'll kill you. But on purpose, the Buddha took a path which would take him near the assassin's lair. Angulimala was hiding out. So Angulimala hiding in his cave, I imagine it is, and he saw the Buddha. So the Buddha's just an unarmed monk, no weapons. He's wearing just a simple robe, and he's walking very slowly and mindfully along a path in the forest ahead of him. So Angulimala thought, great, this is going to be a cinch. I'm going to get this guy, get my last finger. And he grabbed his sword. So Angulimala had a sword. And he ran up the path after the Buddha. And he ran full pelt. He ran really fast. But although the Buddha was walking very slowly, Angulimala just couldn't catch up with him. He tried to run faster and got on a sprint. But whatever he did, the Buddha's slow, steady pace outflanked him. So finally, really exhausted and baffled, which was what was going on, Angulimala cried out, "Stop, monk!" And the Buddha replied calmly, "I have stopped, Angulimala." So the Buddha's mind had stopped craving, hatred and ill will, ignorance, and had reached a place which Angulimala actually couldn't reach with his sword. So Angulimala was so impressed that he didn't kill the Buddha. Instead, actually, he went for refuge to him and became his disciple, and actually eventually became a monk. I mean, he did have to go through quite a lot because of, obviously, he had killed 99 people and terrorized a lot of people, so it wasn't like everything was fine for him immediately. But so I think it's a kind of mysterious story. I'm not going to explain it all, but to me it says something. And it's got several echoes of the symbolism of Amoghasiddhi, because the Buddha is fearless. He knows he can be fearless. He's very active, and he has this mudra of stop. I can imagine him going, it's like, Angulimala's going, stop, and then in return he goes, I have stopped. And I think there's the paradox of it. How can the Buddha, he's sauntering along, and how can he outdistance the serial killer? And I think what the story is saying is ultimately the Buddha has the complete confidence of actually not being afraid to die. He's not afraid to die. He's kind of seen through life and death, and that's no longer holds the fear that it holds for most of us. So he can act in a way with compassion actually to Angulimala because of that confidence, that fearlessness. So to finish off, we're going to go back to the double Vajra. Yeah, so this is this symbol of total integration, I said. What does that mean? So it actually links with perfect action. So if you remember from the intermediate course, one of the limbs of the Eightfold Path, you remember in the intermediate course we went through those different 8 limbs, and one of them was action, which included ethics and a number of other things. And when Sangha Night, who founded this movement, he wrote about the Noble Eightfold Path and this perfect action. He called it total action. Well, he talked about a thing called total action, which I really like, actually, total action, because it feels like it's from some kind of great movie, like Total Action. So total action. So what that means, it's the act in which the total self is involved. Another word might be wholehearted, I think. There's something in which our whole self, our whole heart is involved. Because mostly we're fragmented. We're divided. We can't act with the whole of ourselves because only part of ourselves is present. And I think sometimes that's because of fear. Maybe always because of fear, I'm not sure. Some of us, we can't put all of ourselves into something. We're holding something back. So we maybe don't put the whole of ourselves into our work unless we really love it, unless we're an artist or something like that. We don't do that. We don't maybe put the whole of ourselves into our families. When with our children, we're maybe not giving them our whole heart at the time, maybe into our interests, into our spiritual practice. So when we meditate, we don't bring our whole self to it. When we study, listen to talks, we don't bring our whole self. When we're talking to friends, maybe we don't bring that. So there's something about this beautiful, for me, image of bringing our whole heart, our total self, this total action. And actually only the fully enlightened mind can do that, act with the whole of itself, because we're just bound to have lots of different selves. It's a bit like we've got 100 different selves, all with different ideas. So when we're like, I don't know, maybe 80% of us are meditating and 10% are thinking they'd rather be playing football, and the other 10% is thinking, I don't know, what else. Do you see what I mean? It's like we've got all these different selves that want to do different things. But sometimes we can have a foretaste of this experience, this feeling of being completely immersed in something, when all of us, so our effort, imagination, our love is involved, where we're totally involved in something. We might find that sometimes when we're meditating, we might find it doing ritual, we might find that playing sports, for instance, like I sometimes go open water swimming, and I love that. I can often feel really present in that moment. Perhaps with a friend, when you're talking with a friend, you might feel very present. So this wonderful sense of being in the zone, really, just present with what's going on. And, it's joyous, it's delightful, it's a really pleasant feeling. And actually this, an enlightened version of this is the fearless action which Amoghasiddhi represents. It's this giving of our whole heart to whatever we're doing. And one way that we can develop this integration, this wholeheartedness, is actually doing the mindfulness of breathing meditation. Because what happens is again and again, we train our mind and our heart to come back to our breath. So we've got a disintegrated mind, it's going off into all sorts of things. Things are coming up from our depths, maybe, just memories, all sorts of things are coming up. And we train ourselves to come back and back, to rest on the breath, to be one-pointed, have our awareness going in one way. And that brings all ourselves together. And that can be really beautiful, that feeling of being completely present, completely alive. And this is the mystery of Amoghasiddhi, this action, this mysterious, ungraspable action. So his attributes are power and energy, but his activity is subtle and hidden. He has this powerful fearlessness mudra, and he holds the double Vajra. So his kindness is unstoppable, spontaneous. His wisdom is all-accomplishing. So we can imagine ourselves fully integrated, completely alive and present, giving the gift of fearlessness to the world and flying in that great chariot through the midnight sky.